Part of the problem is we killed the healers. A lot of that medicine is really hard to stay intact. You can heal from the sky, from the earth, from the fire, from the water, from space. And that direct experience of the elements that are outside your body are also inside your body. And Ayurveda has a very eloquent way of understanding.
Our next guest, Cate Stillman, is a podcast host. She is also the author of 8 books, as I counted it. She started publishing back in 2015 with her most popular book titled Body Thrive, Up-Level Your Body and Your Life with 10 Habits from Ayurveda and Yoga.
Well, it's much easier to do fasting if you're looping, which is totally disgusting, but it's where you're actually upcycling all your urine, and it goes from tasting disgusting to tasting like coconut water within 24 hours. And it just brought up so many questions, like why do we have chronic inflammation? What are the most primal habits? What are the simplest solutions that everybody can do that are free?
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. I love to deliver practical value to the listeners about health and longevity, and this episode will do just that. So make sure you stay tuned for the whole episode. Our next guest, Cate Stillman, is a podcast host. She actually recently had me on her podcast titled Thrive with Cate. Thank you for that. She is also the author of 8 books, as I counted it. She started publishing back in 2015 with her most popular book titled Body Thrive, Up-Level Your Body and Your Life with 10 Habits from Ayurveda and Yoga. Hopefully I know I say it close if I'm not exactly right. Another book is near and dear to my heart as it deals with inflammation. It is titled Uninflamed, 21 Anti-Inflammatory Primal Habits to Heal, Sleep Better, Lose Weight, and Crush Your Life Goals. She is the founder of Yoga Healer, Wellness Pro Academy, and the leader of clubs that help people crush their life goals. Hopefully today I can tease out some simple practical habits to help you crush your health goals. Cate, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
All right, before we jump into your area of expertise, I always like to go much further back, like way further back. What was it like growing up, little Cate? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? If there was any event or someone that you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a yoga teacher, Ayurvedic practitioner, an author of 8 books, a podcast host, what or who might that be?
That's a good question. It falls into the wounded healer category, right? Where we all, from what happened early on, it determines sometimes what we do later on. So for me, let's see, I grew up on the East Coast. Mostly in Massachusetts, for most of my formative years in suburbia, standard American diet, very standard American lifestyle with a lot of athleticism built in. So both of my parents were very active. My mom was more of like a forest outdoorsy person. My dad was more of the jock, team sports. And so I was in both of those worlds, love of the mountains, and also just, 3, whatever it is, like a 3-bar captain in high school for like 3 different sports. So that was sort of my, very athletic, very academically driven. As a teenager, I got into more of a planetary awareness of just feeling more of a global citizen, someone who is ecologically aware, and I would say more enlightenment consciousness aware. And that really informed then what I went on to study in college, which was more or less international environmental politics and economics, to understand how, as more of a meta thinker, like what can we do to protect our planet so that it survives for future generations. And then looking at that more from like a legal and economic perspective. So that's a little bit the standard American diet side and the on-attachment parenting. So a lot of us were raised by parents that were influenced by thought leaders at the time in the 70s, 80s, like Dr. Spock, who was it's like the opposite of Gabor Mate. So rather than, attaching to the baby, not attaching to the baby. And that did create a lot of postpartum stress for me as an infant. I was sandwiched between two siblings. And so there's probably just a lot of, convenience to that, with having three kids really close in age. But as a result, my nervous system was really very deeply triggered, which created constipation, which created migraines, which created allergies. So completely backed up lymphatics as a child that then just had downstream symptoms that were only treated by going to the doctor. So I was nicknamed like the pill popper, foghorn, these things that were just part of my personality. So even though I was very athletic, and thank gosh I was very athletic, because that must have helped my lymphatics a lot. There was just a lot that, I would say that I was kind of up against physically, that then made me very curious about what could work, like what could I get into? And that drove me ultimately into a path of, looking at different healing methods, because in my international environmental politics sojourn, I ended up studying Chinese political economy. And in China, I thought I might go into Chinese medicine. But at the root of it, I really found that if we could raise human consciousness, through planetary health and ecological health and the body as ecology, that would be a much faster route. And that's what brought me into Ayurveda, which is the healing science from India. It does exist in Chinese medicine. It exists in all First Peoples cultural medicines, but it's just much more, I would say, explicit in Ayurveda, where we don't have that white coat syndrome. Instead, it's the whole system is designed for you to heal yourself.
So you mentioned sports. I think soccer's one of them, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, soccer, track, and basketball in high school, and then in college it was ultimate frisbee, soccer, and track.
So I played soccer for 25 years, so we are kindred spirits as it comes to what position did you play?
Oh yeah, goalkeeper.
Goalkeeper. Oh, you are crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goalkeepers, they can be a little unhinged. Their job is to throw themselves at the feet of other athletes as they're trying to kick the ball. So there is that component, and also a lot of ability to influence the game. That's really cool. You study environmental protection. You've got this history that has you looking for solutions for your own health. You end up studying kind of in China, or at least about China, and then ultimately land in Ayurvedic medicine. Like, what was the first thing as you're exploring Ayurvedic that resonated with you, and like, this is something that I really need to kind of dig in and deeper?
I think it's the mix of consciousness, like, because it is the sister science to yoga, and yoga's ultimate goal is enlightenment. So it's in modern culture, it's different than, and even recent culture, it's changing so rapidly. So even like yoga in the 1990s is so different than yoga right now in the United States, let alone that it has this, at least a couple thousand year history. The asana, or the physical part, really only goes back like 500-600 years. So there's a lot of, misunderstanding about what yoga looked like 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. But where my interest in the Vedic system was part of that more ancient wisdom around what is enlightenment, like what is the full awareness capacity of being human, and then how that also intersected with just the most indigenous way of understanding physiology and health and healing. So in Ayurveda, you're, and this is true in all First Peoples medicine. I just want to be really clear that in the Vedic system, it's the complexity is very well codified. And so it's an intact wisdom tradition, which is so rare. Because like, if you look at Native American medicine, like, part of the problem is we killed the healers. And so a lot of that medicine is really hard to stay intact. Not 100%, gone, but in the Vedic system, they're very into complexity and writing things down. And just different cultures, different levels, but what they all have in common is more of this indigenous understanding of you can heal from the sky, from the earth, from the fire, from the water, from space. And that direct experience of the elements that are outside your body are also inside your body. And Ayurveda has a very eloquent way of understanding. And I also knew that because of that complexity, like, I would never hit the bottom of the well if I dedicated a few lifetimes to understanding the wisdom. Like, it's that vast.
That's really cool. I'm going to change gears a little bit and then we'll come back. So
Yeah.
you mentioned in one interview that I saw the rule of improv, which is yes and. This is very exciting to me because I actually was a professional improv artist for 5 years. How did you? Yeah,
Oh,
it was
Chris.
fantastic.
Wow.
How did you get exposed to yes and how do you apply yes and in any aspect of your life?
Yeah. And I can talk about it in coaching as well. So I'm more of like a meta thinker, like big picture, big problems, easy, simple solutions thinker. So I ran into design thinking in my journey as a coach, because essentially I'm a coach. I lead mastermind groups and I coach wellness pros to lead their own more club model type mastermind groups. So we were just looking for the most effective tools in order to do that, and tools that are, especially for people that are transitioning from teaching or being a practitioner. So I work with a lot of yoga teachers, a lot of Pilates, fitness, people who are teaching movement or teaching Ayurveda, as well as practitioners, whether they're a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic doctor or an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner. And what I found is that, if and tunes us into the inflammation conversation, if that which is causing chronic disease is chronic inflammation, and if most of chronic inflammation is diet and lifestyle driven, then we better get really good at coaching people to shift their diet and lifestyle, because often it's not the information that's missing. So in teaching is usually informational as opposed to motivational, right? And so we were looking for very simple, transferable skill sets and structures that affect how a group of people is able to make these diet and lifestyle changes to experience what it is they, what I basically say, like, what is the future you most want to experience, in your body, in your relationships, in your dharma, your purpose, because all of these things contribute to what we experience as health. So that's where I ran into, design thinking, and then a lot of the improv types of exercises are also mindset, right? So if we look at yes and, so someone, as a practitioner, client or patient might come in and they might, say at the root of it, like, this is what I'm actually eating, right? This is what my bedtime actually looks like. This is what my morning routine actually looks like. And instead of saying, like, you've got it all wrong, this is what you need to be doing, which creates a lot of, especially in a lot of people have fixed mindset, like Carol Dweck's work on mindset,
Yeah,
right? Where it's like, it's just too hard. And so how do we make it easier? So like, yes, okay, awesome. And like, let's look at some of the things that are working, because you're doing something, like, you're breathing. Awesome. You got like 75% lung capacity. Awesome. Like, let's start there. And let's start the day with like 5 deeper, slower breaths, and maybe reach up to the sky as we inhale and exhale and touch the ground, and just do that 5 times before we grab our coffee. So that little and has to be, I love the 2-minute rule, which in Atomic Habits by James Clear, and also Tiny Habits, he picked that up from Tiny Habits from BJ Fogg at Stanford. It's just like, how do you, that and part is just like a little bit doable from where that yes, like where we're actually starting. Like, yes, I'm a total basket case, and I can do a little thing to make myself feel better every morning.
I love that, because I really love the role. And at some point I was in a networking group as the education coordinator and taught yes and I still bump into a guy here in Houston who's like, you have changed my life because of yes and one other practical value, which is maybe not as practical kind of as you're guiding people, teaching people, but is just good for self-development, is if you're analyzing your own language down to the level of trying to remove the word but from your vocabulary, you will get better. Like, there's just no way that you can't become more aware of your communication, how you communicate. Those struggles are worth it. And it is a struggle to remove but. By the way, as we were kind of prepping to start this interview, I used but, and I was like, wait, she knows improv. Like, and when I was on stage, and practicing to be on stage, that was you got called out for using but in any context, right? Like, hey, we really should allow the guest to throw popcorn on the floor, and the answer is not but we have to vacuum it up. It's and that seems like it's going to be a mess that we have to vacuum up later. And even that, and you pointed this out, is building a bridge, not destroying a bridge. I think that's what I really really loved about it. And then you also mentioned Carol Dweck's stuff.
Yeah, and I'd love to just throw in my friends at speechskills.com who Kara and Ed Alter, who do a lot of like Fortune 100 company training on speech skills, and their background is improv. And they started BATS in San Francisco, which is the Bay Area theater, which was is still alive and well as the improv theater in San Francisco. So it's very true what you're saying of just this overlap of improv skills with speaking skills. And I would even argue with leadership skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because if you can figure out how to build bridges, that is absolutely a leadership skill. So you kind of have really thrown together yoga, Ayurvedic medicine, and then now thrown in clubs into the mix. Why did you bring in? I feel like you've touched on it, but why did you really bring in clubs as a powerful piece?
I started my Wellness Pro career as an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner and as a fairly serious yoga teacher. So not the fun one, the one who's like the hardcore one that like you really actually wanted to learn yoga, that one. And
you're not learning it right.
Well, it's more of like there's depth. So for anyone who wanted to drop a few levels down, I was their gal, and people do love that with yoga where it's, it goes somewhere. So I also am a lifestyle entrepreneur. So that was clear from the get-go. Like I'm a skier, I'm a surfer, I'm a mountain biker. So I moved from San Francisco back to live in the Tetons, where I'd already spent my ski bum time, and I basically set up shop there. And I also picked up some very wealthy clients. So the people that were paying the bills were the wealthy clients. And I was doing these very high-end retreats. I was doing one-on-one Ayurvedic medicine consultations. I was teaching yoga classes. This is typical for a lot of wellness pros. They have like 5 or 6 different things that they're doing that are all kind of working in some way, shape, or form for the business. And then I started leading detoxes as a group. And the reason I started leading detoxes is it was the off season, and I needed a detox because it means it wasn't winter or summer, it was spring or fall. And I needed personally to go through my own Ayurvedic cleanse because that's what was keeping me evolving in my own health. And I was like, I might as well do this with a group. So I did. So it was the first year, I think I brought people along, and then I did it again in the fall, and I did it again in the spring, and I did it again in the fall. And so fast forward, I've led this for 23 years consecutively, at least twice a year. But I had a data set after a few years of who was actually getting healthier around me. Was it the high-end one-on-one clients? Was it the Ayurvedic consultations? Was it the people coming to yoga class? Or was it the detoxers? And there was some overlap in some of those categories, but by far and away, the people that were making the most progress showed up twice a year with me for 3 weeks to do an in-depth detox in which they were learning habits. They were just learning like what a good week feels like, a really good week. And they were these 3-week experiences. So then fast forward, I was making decent money in basically a club-based model, which is where you combine a curriculum with a community, right? So when you have that combination of a curriculum and a community, and in that curriculum and community, what you do together is coaching. So you have like these 3 C's and the 4 C's, like the club, that it all fits under there. Those of you who like letters, right? So the coaching is what was happening with the community, right? In order to experience the curriculum. So it wasn't esoteric wisdom. It was lived, practical. This actually changed my life. So I started my first one of those. It was Living Ayurveda in 2007. So at that point, by 2010, I had a number of different income streams. I had the high-end clients. I had basically a mastermind group that was operating like a club because there's community that was in renewal. So people, after they got through it, they just wanted to do it again, right? So we're in this renewal mechanism. So my friends who are all yoga teachers, Ayurvedic medicine practitioners, naturopathic doctors, gym owners, like everyone in wellness, that's all I hung out with. They were like, how are you making money?
Because we're not.
Because we're not. And I was making money and buying real estate, right? So I'm like making money in my business and not reinvesting it in my business. I'm basically just like buying assets with it. And they're like, how and I'm surfing and I'm skiing and mountain biking. And they're like, you've got the lifestyle business, you've got the revenue, your clients seem to love you, right? And I don't know how to, and they were kind of where I was back in 2002, which is these different income streams, which were largely transactional. So low commitment, people paying by how they felt that week. Like, I feel like going to yoga class this week, or I feel like calling for a massage, or I feel like seeing an Ayurvedic practitioner, I feel like buying some supplements. They were still in that, whereas I had learned high ticket sales, and I had learned the benefit of having a committed group of people with a curriculum and coaching moving to a desired end result together. And that was just magic. And so I basically started yoga health coaching at that point, which was how to do that as a business, just with the habits of yoga and Ayurveda. And then what happened from that was, more of the naturopathic doctors, the Chinese medicine doctors, the functional medicine doctors. They're just like, I'm not that into yoga, but I really like what you're doing in your content marketing, and I'm in your funnel, and I would totally do this if it wasn't for yoga. And I was like, and I was branded for yoga for over 20 years. And I was like, I'm just going to do Wellness Pro Academy and teach all different kinds of wellness pros, the club model. And we have people that one guy throws axes, and his whole thing is like showing people who don't have focus how to like build a target and throw axes and knives at it. And that's like the basis of his wellness club. So it's pretty broad, you know what I mean? From like a functional medicine doctor in Germany who's just working with women with hormones who, basically just want to have their best life ever. Yeah. So we're all over the board in Wellness Pro Academy intentionally.
Yeah. The board being the thing you throw the axe at. That's pretty awesome. We before we started, we mentioned Alex Ramosi, and I see a lot of parallels, right? Like, how do you help somebody? Because this is where kind of he made his initial fortune. How do you take somebody who's breaking even, or maybe even losing money on a monthly basis, and how do you get them to the next level? And I have to think that one of his premises, which is, like, you have not learned anything unless you've changed your behavior. And it's when you realize, and when you pulled back and you looked at these, week-long detoxes where you could actually imbue some actual habits that they would take home. Not that they could take home, because they could take a conversation home, but they actually do take home. There are so many really, really good parallels. What part? So now, I don't know if you have any comments on any of that.
Yeah, it was exactly. It's like what I noticed is we look at, like, in Wellness Pro Academy, we look at most wellness pros are stuck in consults or classes or courses. And this shift to clubs or annual memberships. So this is actually, if you're involved in school or schoolers, which is also Alex's, he combined with Sam Ovens in that. There was a post this past week on monthly, it was like MMR versus annual recurring revenue, ARR versus MRR. And you could tell in the people that were voting, like, how experienced they were in business. And what I was super fascinated was that there was a 2-to-1 ratio. It's an evolved community in terms of understanding where specific adult-driven education is intersecting in the emergent marketplace. I would say that's school and schoolers does it really well. And twice as many of the entrepreneurs in that space were on annual recurring revenue. And that's what we're teaching in the club model. It's not a month-to-month commitment. It's a year-to-year commitment. And that's really what I found, was that the people that they're doing the thing with me, whether it was a detox or whether it was a course, like, I just don't want it to end. Right. And the people I'm meeting in here, like, these are the best conversations I'm having all week. So I'm like, how do we build a business around that? And that's really what got me, to the club model for wellness pros.
It's really interesting because as the business owner, like, people from the outside looking in might be thinking, well, of course you don't want it to end. But the reality is the clients don't want it to end either, right? The
clients don't want it to end. Sorry, I said that wrong. That's what I meant, is like, after the detox, the clients were like, I don't want to lose my support group. And the course would end, and they don't want to take another course because they're like, I'm just implementing. I just need to implement. I want to keep doing these things and keep evolving with you guys. So, yeah.
So as you shift and you're really, taking the success that you're finding, in putting together, your kind of various pieces of your practice, and now you're helping other people. How often do you kind of pull back and go, okay, it's not just the case that you're helping businesses, right? You're actually helping businesses deliver immense value, healthy value to a lot of people. Do you ever kind of pull back and go like, I'm probably impacting, I don't know, have you calculated the number? Is it tens of thousands? Is it hundreds of thousands?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. What I love though is the stories, that it's, so what we found with the wellness pros who implement the model, and this is what they were doing in yoga health coaching as well, is I was the most curious about the feedback that their clients were giving them when they shifted the model. And that was my measure of success. Like that was the thing that mattered. It was like, otherwise it's just BS. Otherwise it's just like another gimmick. And I'm like I've never been a gimmick person at all. I'm like deep wisdom, planetary consciousness, like we're all in it together, like everyone live on purpose, like let's experience our potentiality. And I know you are too. And so it was really and what we found, it was amazing because every member of Wellness Pro Academy or Yoga Health Coaching who implemented this model and we received feedback from their members, it always worked. Like 100% of the time, it was like, this is amazing. Like I'm making whether it was weight loss or hormone balance or sleeping better or just having better conversations.
Or axe throwing.
Or I can actually, I have a hobby that doesn't just involve drinking, and I'm now, totally.
No, so that's pretty fantastic. It's cool when your business opportunity is aligned with actually having a positive impact, right? Like that's really important. Again, do you have a goal of how many people you'd like to impact through this, or have you thought about that?
It's fascinating because then it's like, how do you measure, right? And so what I've heard so much as I work with wellness pros who have these global aspirations. They have these mighty aspirations, but when we actually break it down into metrics, it gets pretty gray area pretty fast. So for me in Wellness Pro Academy, my goal in there is to have 300 members or 30 of 10 different subtypes of wellness pros. So again, in those subtypes, it's like 30 people in movement yoga studios, like 30 supplement companies, 30 functional medicine doctors. So when I break it down that way, like that is our big goal over there, is like, can we get to, because if we are global, right, that's not that many, but it's a really decent sized test group, you know? And so that's where I'd like to be.
I think you could measure this, right? If they were all on a very similar platform, and then you're like, hey,
that is measurable. Yeah. But it's not like millions, you know what I mean? Because as soon as we get into millions, although I tell you, like from the books and I've podcasted for over a decade, and I've gone through different experiences with list size and, I've been in I feel like the digital marketing world to see a lot of like the ups and downs and the ins and outs. And now that there's all these new rules with email marketing and these 90-day open rates, like I've seen so many trends because my dad also was a technologist. So I was raised in technology, which made it much easier for me to just be interested in these things as they're, like the beginning of podcasting was so fascinating. Like those podcast conferences back in the early days, it's like, or it just changed. Everything's gone through these rises and falls. And so I don't know. At this point, it's almost more, super woo woo and etheric to me, that just me knowing that I'm doing this work on an energetic level, that it's doing other types of work. And that's very kind of yogic in a way of just, you can meditate for world peace and it actually ripples, right? That there's that level of, right now I'm just into the integrity of trying to help the person in front of me, whether that's a wellness pro or it's someone in Club Thrive where we model the way. Because a lot of business trainings for wellness pros, they don't actually model the business model. And so for me, that's always been really important, that I'm not just going to give you information. I'm going to show you how that's working for us and how we're doing that at Club Thrive Global. That just me being in that integrity right now is so much more important than the numbers. Whereas like a few years ago, it was like all the numbers and all that.
No, it sounds like you're in a really good place delivering value to people who deliver value, which is a very cool multiplier to be involved in.
Well, and like a lot of my lifestyle goals I've achieved. So I have a beautiful lake house. I have a beautiful condo in Mexico at the surf break. I have a beautiful ski house in the Tetons. So like a lot of those goals that were driving me before, I'm now at that, like, I just really want to do what we do in Wellness Pro Academy, which is starting in number one, like lead from your wellness lifestyle, right? Like have impact that's leading from the habits of your wellness lifestyle, and then make profit based on the habits that are leading from your. So I just feel like there's just this, I was very much more like hyped up entrepreneur a few years ago. And now it's just more of, I'm super curious about the integrity piece.
That's very cool.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about chronic inflammation. One of your books, right? Inflamed. What was the genesis of that book? Like, where did you start deciding to write this book? And then, if we have time, and we might not, because this is a fascinating conversation for me, I'd like to dive into as many of these 10 as we can. But what was the genesis of when did you? And maybe it was as simple as I'm an entrepreneur and I need the credibility piece of a book, and also now let's figure out the integrity behind it. Like that's a fair reason to write a book, actually.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote Body Thrive. Like Body Thrive was like my calling card book, and it was also the like, I can't believe I have to say this again, so I might as well just write it down and say chapter 3.
Yeah.
And I was pissed that book didn't already exist, because to me it was like the most basic teachings of yoga and Ayurveda, which is basically how you live a day. So how do you live a good day is the basis of Ayurveda, and that book hadn't been written, and I was like, this is crazy. And so it wasn't being taught by Ayurvedic medicine. And there's now 10 books that are basically that book, Body Thrive. But at the time it was very, to me, it was redundant and it was edgy in the field. But fast forward to Uninflamed, this is going to be a totally out of, probably most listeners' comfort zone. So disclaimer.
Yeah, no, that's good.
In my leadership style, I'm very much like tribes, like Seth Godin tribes, which is a community needs a shared mission and vision, and then a way to communicate. And so I had been leading that way for a very long time and allowing the club to lead itself. So yoga health coaching and Body Thrive as clubs were very evolved. Lots of people, lots of brilliant wellness pros sharing their wisdom within a community where I'm yes and like, wow, I don't know that. Like, teach me too. And so what came out of that is one of my members said, one of my yoga health coaches, who's basically a wellness pro with her own business, was like, what do you know about Shivambu? And I was like, what? She's like, what do you know about Shivambu? And I'm like, I should know this word because it's Sanskrit.
I have written a book. I should be the one who's explaining it to you now.
Yeah, like I should know what Shivambu is. And so Shiva in Sanskrit means so there's a lot of different words for the divine. There's a lot of different words for God. And so Shiva is the god. He's like the god of gods, kind of like Zeus. Like he's heavy hitter, he's the one that's kind of controlling a lot of the other things that are going on with the god goddess pantheon. So I'm like, okay, Shiva. Ambu means water. And then she said urine therapy. I'm like, oh, right. Shivambu is urine therapy. So urine therapy, this god water concept of that our urine is medicine, it actually appears in every First Peoples culture. So it's everywhere. And so I'm like, okay, and this is also a little other disclaimer, or what came before, or predecessor, not disclaimer, is that in Body Thrive, I noticed that my thinking, I'm a very meta thinker. So it's like, I'm a bigger picture thinker. I'm like, what are the most basic ways that my people in the detoxes, like, what are they actually doing different that they're getting results? And it all came down to the basic day-to-day habits. Right. So when I looked at that and I looked at those basic day-to-day habits in writing Body Thrive, I'm like, these are in every culture. They're in every First Peoples medicine. They're not specific at all to Ayurveda. Like Ayurveda is just good at writing these things down. That's just the lens I came in through. But really, it's all grandmother's wisdom. It's all the basics. It's all this people's medicine, the stuff that we knew before we thought pharmaceuticals was medicine. All right. So then that's who I am. That's what I've been teaching in and out for, 12 years by the time the Shivambu conversation happens. And I had interviewed someone 20 years earlier. I'd known about urine as diagnostics, how it's used in Ayurvedic medicine when I was trained as a practitioner. And I'd interviewed someone who 20 years before, because I've been doing this for a long time, had used part of that as his like medicinal, right? And so at that point I was like, okay, tell us everything you know to her. And she's like, oh, I learned it from a yoga teacher. And the first way you experiment is when you pee, you just rub some pee on one hand and not the other. And so after a week, you have like these two test groups and you just notice what's going on in the skin of one hand and the skin of the other. So I did that. I was totally grossed out, just like everybody is. But I had actually been studying a lot of psychology, all of Jordan Peterson's Western psychology, because I have a background more in Eastern psychology than Western psychology. And I had learned that disgust is a trained emotion. It can be biological. Disgust can be biological, but a lot of it is more conditional. So people in power decide what disgust is, and they use disgust as a taboo. And so they create a rule, and often these taboos go against our intrinsic intelligence, our longevity intelligence. So I was like, okay, this is clearly falling into that category where like absolutely petrified of our pee, think that it's sterile, which is not, and think that it is dirty, which is also not. And so the more I looked into it, I'm like, what the heck is going on? So then I read, and the way it's probably similar to you, Chris, where it's like, I don't know anything about this, so I'll read 10 books and listen to 100 podcasts and I'll become an expert overnight. So I did that. And I was like, what the heck? Like how, and why is it in every culture? And what is it really doing? And then I was running my own experiments for a well over, I'd say 12 to 14 months, like pretty hardcore. I was like, why does this work? Like what is happening? And it's, so if you think of like 1% of the people on the planet are like health nuts, like this is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. Yeah. So the user group is really small, but it is global and it is well organized. And so then I just started interviewing all the experts. So then I had like the 20 therapy experts at the time on the podcast and ran into even more just like crazy data of what happens when you actually age your urine, which is like the weirder of the weird, and what happens with the oxidation.
The 10th of the 10th of the percent of the 10th of,
Yeah, exactly. And why does it show up in the ancient texts of multiple traditions, whether it's in the Pali Canon or whether it's in the Vedic tradition? Turning water into wine is the way that it shows up in the Christian tradition. So it's in these ancient mythological type stories and in these texts. And so as you age urine, the oxidation reduction potential goes from about -25 to about -200. So it's the safest antioxidant in the body. So I'm like, why? Like, wow. How does this work? And how has this information been stolen from us as primates? Because other primates do it. So then I'm interviewing doctors, and I was interviewing this guy who was, he was the head of medicine at UCLA. And I was like, what do you know about this? And he's like, and he was European. He was actually which tend to be a little bit more open-minded than Americans. Even though American scientists and American doctors consider themselves scientists, they often have a lot of disgust block on this, and more so than doctors in other cultures. Like European doctors are much more open-minded on topics like this, I found, as well as doctors from India and China. And I get it. Like that said, and I know I'm like, in the weird of the weird, but we have to understand our cultural, our cultural discrimination against certain types of information. He said, actually, we measured the electrolytes of it was a mama rat, had her babies, and we noticed she was drinking the baby's urine. So we started to measure electrolytes before and after she'd drink the baby's urine. I'm like, that's wild. And what happened? Well, the electrolytes went through the roof. So And this is the stuff you hear about in urine therapy communities. It's like, well, urine is rich in electrolytes, that it's your ultraplasma filtrate. So it has everything that's in your body, that you're able to create a complete feedback loop, a complete water cycle, just like the water rains down and then it gets absorbed by the clouds and then it rains down and it gets absorbed, and you get a feedback loop of what's happening. And then that changes the taste. So then you'll naturally so say you're drinking too much, you won't have the taste for it. Say you're eating too much, like you won't have the taste for it. Say you're fasting. And I know we had already been teaching a lot about fasting and whatnot. Well, it's much easier to do fasting if you're looping, which is totally disgusting, but it's where you're actually upcycling all your urine and it goes from tasting disgusting to tasting like coconut water within 24 hours.
Wow.
And it just brought up so many questions that I started writing this monster of a book of like, why do we have chronic inflammation? What are the most primal habits? And my drive as a, not as a business person, but just as a wellness pro is like, what are the simplest solutions that everybody can do that are free? And that's how I've always oriented my work as a wellness pro. It's like, you don't have to be affluent. You don't need any tool. You don't need anything to feel better. So what are those most basic things? And that's what gave rise to Uninflamed and then the primal habits. So again, not the most appetizing of responses.
No. Well, one thing, kudos to you, right? Because you don't title a book Urine Therapy, even though that's maybe a big component. I don't know how big a component of it was, but it was certainly a component. Like, you've got to speak to the audience you got to be aware of how to speak to the audience that's actually going to listen. And I think it's fascinating. I was interviewed by Gary Lynham. I don't know if you know him, with Human Garage. And
yeah, Gary. Yeah. Because he's into it too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. And so at the beginning, we were, the camera crew's getting ready, and I was like, hey, just share with you, I have an improv background, so you can ask me anything. And they're like, what do you think of urine therapy? And I was like, I just learned a little bit about it on the back porch because somebody was sharing with me about it actually topically, and the uric acid is actually something that they use in topical creams and lotions for skincare.
And urea mostly.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting. I'm not convinced yet. I'll just share with that. But I think
you have to use it. So there's no convincing. So, and this is the other thing I think from your work in longevity is like, you can't convince someone of the benefits of fasting. They have to fast. Well, or you can't convince someone of the benefits of taking a supplement. Like, they have to use it. So one of the most fascinating things, and I think just to connect the dots of why does urine therapy work, because that's really where I ended up with Uninflamed, is that so if you think of urine, it's 100%, you take 100% of urine, like what that is, right? So 95% of it's water. So, and it's structured water. So it's been structured by the human body. So there's something to hydration with that. So what's in the other 5%? And you nailed it. Like, urea and uric acid is the majority of that other 5%, as well as trace everything that's in the body. So if we look at what's urea and uric acid are strong in elementally, just, as a scientist, you'll be interested, is it's nitrogen. So you have these high concentrations of nitrogen with oxygen. And you think of, that sounds a lot like fertilizer. So when we want to fertilize a crop to grow that greens, that which gives life force, right, which might feed the cattle who are eating the grass, right, all the things that we eat are from this chlorophyll cycle, right? And we know that the chlorophyll molecule and the hemoglobin molecule are pretty close to identical. Yep. Right? Super parallel. So there's a relationship between the life force in our blood with that which grows green, and that green is nitrogen fed. So once we're there, once we get that, now there's one more little leap to make. I think people are trying to understand the why it works. And that's really why I wrote Uninflamed, just like, why does this work? And then what are all the other primal habits that go along with this recovered intelligence? Is it feeds the microbiomes. So if you think you have an oralome, you have a sinus microbiome, you have a gut microbiome, you have a blood microbiome, you have a skin microbiome. So everywhere we look, we're like, oh wait, who I was isn't exactly who I thought I was. We're not just human DNA cells. And that's where we can start to understand terrain theory. So the more we nourish the terrain of the body, right, the better we feel. So then what is the substance that nourishes terrain? Nitrogen. So it's when you have this nitrogen coupled with oxygen and hydrogen, right? That's where you get the most rejuvenation of the microbiomes. And that's why when people have any little thing, like, so if anyone has something they want to put it on, like whether it's a cut or like my mom had swelling in her eye and then just like put some pee on, and she didn't know if she'd scratched something or what, but it was all inflamed yesterday. And she just put a little cloth, laid down. 30 minutes later, the inflammation's gone and the skin feels better because it's been nourished by that urea.
Wow.
Crazy. So, it gets crazy, Chris.
What to the thought, right? Because I'm new to this. What to the thought of the body is pretty spectacular. Why is it giving it up if it's supposed to actually be reprocessed?
Like, why does it
value in reprocessing?
Like, why does it rain? Do you know what I mean? So the more we see the microcosm and the macrocosm and the macrocosm and the microcosm, because that's a deep question to meditate on of like, why does it rain? Like, why aren't we just in this moisture climate
and
bubble?
Like, and there's no rain. It's just the right moisture for whatever.
And, you know, in Ayurveda, they say because life is cyclical. Like you can't separate life in cycles.
I see weather as not something that evolves, right? I see people and animals as something that evolves. So the weather is just what it is. And we have this evolution. And you know, one of the great kind of points of evolution is the abject risks that sleep puts us in and is still absolutely necessary, right? Like there is nothing dumber to do than to lay down for 8 hours, basically unconscious. And if there was any way to evolve out of sleep, we would have, and we still don't have the explanation of why we haven't, right? Or why you can't. So we just accept that it's 100%. But that has a parallel of, well, maybe there is a parallel, but you know, if the body's good, as we evolved, if there were components in urine that were really valuable, it would have been significantly advantageous for our bladders to be able to shove that back into our system, right, without even excreting it. By the way, we're having a fun little brainstorm.
I know, I love this, and I so appreciate that you're willing to go here because so many people just can't go here.
Down. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they just can't go here. So another way of looking at it is we could look at fecal matter. Let's look at fecal matter. Same story, right? So I love the term "holy shit," right? Because and anyone who's ever been, you know, sick enough with SIBO and has entertained a fecal transplant has started to understand that, like, we also poop out our microbiome in terms of a lot of really great living bacteria, as well as a lot of like really great fiber, because there's a cycle. So cycles can upcycle. So that question of evolution is what happens when you look at, instead of a cycle just going round and round, that's a loop. But a cycle can spiral. And so when a cycle spirals, it can upcycle wisdom. The word for this, there's entropy and there's enthalpy. So when you're upcycling wisdom, the answer to that would be enthalpy, so that there can be a raise in consciousness. And we do see this in urine therapy, even it's in Chinese medicine. So the ancient Taoists, they were using, it was actually the most ancient form of hormone replacement therapy. So old guys would find young guys and they'd be like, pee, and then I'm going to upcycle the testosterone.
I thought it was the blood of a young boy. I didn't realize it was the urine of a young boy.
It's the urine. It's the urine.
Oh, it's also the poop of a young boy too. They've actually shown that in fecal transplants, which I find an absolutely fascinating research area.
Right. What do they call it? Yellow soup, I believe is what it's called in Chinese. Is basically, they've been doing fecal transplants in Chinese medicine for literally thousands of years. And the same thing's true with urine therapy. So like, why do animals do it? So I think instead of trying to understand, how does it work, it's just like, does it work? And the only way we're going to know, does it work, is not going to be through Googling it. It's going to be through putting a few drops on one hand for a week and not on the other hand for a week, and noticing how the skin feels. So what we've seen, because we have a big test group in my community, is like the most stubborn chronic inflammation in the sinuses. So the chronic rhinitis, where people have completely impacted sinus issues, like they just can't breathe, the ostia are really blocked and all that. It might take 6 months to a year, but they get to complete resolution. from snorting. And snorting, I mean, it's so gross. It sounds so gross, but these are people that they've tried everything. They've tried all the pills. They have hundreds of supplements. They're doing fasting. They're doing microbiome diet or carnivore diet or this and that. And they're just not getting. And so it's like, how do you rehydrate the most fibrotic tissue of the body that has been, more or less destroyed from chronic inflammation? It's crazy, Chris. It is crazy.
So I guess I was trying to logic through the evolutionary piece because I think it's probably true that at least the level of disgust, whether there's like clearly other animals just don't care, right? Like I don't think any other animal actually cares. They, cows will pee and then walk through it. Like it just doesn't matter to any other creature. So it is learned. And so how can you unlearn it enough to try it, right? Like to put some urine on your skin is no big deal, right? Like we're not talking snorting yet.
Yeah.
Apparently we were, but like I'm not. But to put it on your skin, like no big deal. Maybe you've got a wound or whatever, always understood. I think you said that it wasn't sterile, or did you say?
Yeah, it's not sterile. So that's what's so fun, right, about science is it changes with technology. So we thought urine was sterile until we had the technology to measure small enough, a small enough molecular structure that was happening within urine. They found that there's all sorts of not just dysbiotic microbes, which tend to show up. Those showed up earlier, but now they're finding the eubiotic microbes that are part of the, what do we call it, like the bladder microbiome or the urinary microbiome that we see that, and my guess is this is like, fast forward 5 years, 10 years, especially with AI and how much that's going to change what we can measure and have larger data sets that can be processes. We'll start to see that a healthy microbiome has an imprint in urine, where you could just look at the urine for the microbiome and have insight into what's happening in every organ of the body.
Okay, well, this took a different turn, and I actually really enjoy it. Like these are the things that I want to debate with people who have an intellectually sharp mind, which you clearly do, who have kind of thought through it from the same, but you're like starting, it's disgusting, but it works, right? Like that's kind of what you would want to hear about this. We didn't get to talk about any other steps for reducing inflammation. This is something for the bold to try, and actually you probably go into similar detail in your book.
I'd say it's what everybody else is doing. It's what, like when you go to Dave Asprey's conference, it's what everybody else is advocating for, which is you're eating real nutrients and no filler, right? You're fasting so that you're in rhythm with fasting and feasting, whether that's on a male rhythm or a female rhythm, that you're doing seasonal resets or challenges where you're engaging in all the adversity habits. I'd say the only other place that I'm probably a little edgier than most is on community, that like who we do what with will increasingly in an AI world where there's just even more and more information. It's the who we do what with that we will pay more money for. So we're seeing this in that annual recurring revenue, like the groups that you belong to, the commune that you build that's pushing your edge on purpose. And Elon Musk talks a lot about that. Like what happens in an AI world, humans forget their purpose. So that means what are we selling? We're selling purpose. We're selling community around purpose, from people who really want to like lean into what's next. And, just looking at that as a habit, looking at commune actually as a habit is probably for most people a gap.
I think it's fascinating for this next generation who I think community is not, at least not face to face. And some of your stuff is online. It'd be interesting how that impacts, right? Because you go out to a restaurant now and you'll see a table of 4 and all 4 people are on their devices and they're not even a community within their own family.
Okay, wait, but have you seen the restaurants that are giving a 10% discount if you put your phone in the phone rack?
I've heard of them. I don't think I've ever been to one. And my wife and I, we're very busy. So there are moments when we're at a table, But with the kids, when we're with the kids, like there is no cell phone. Like these rules I love, and I love to share them because if anybody's listening, I think they're pretty good. Which is one, cell phones, no electronic devices ever in bedrooms. Period. Ever. Bedrooms are for sleeping at that age, and then other things when you get older, and that's it. And even when friends spend the night, their phones are in the hall. They're not in the bedroom. And then the other one is anytime we get in the car for 1 hour, there is no cell phone use. You have to do what I and you had to do. You have to look out the window and figure out some frustrating way to entertain yourself, or in my son's case, fall asleep. Which is probably good because he's falling asleep. So I think, and then at the dinner table, they're honestly, they're 15 now. They've probably had and it's more because they're at the end of the table with other kids and they're on their phones and but it's communal. Although the other day I'm like, dudes, put your phones away and play rock, paper, scissors or something. Like I don't care what it is, like put those things away. And then the other mom was like, yeah, whoever wins gets $5. And so then they were often playing and like so much better than just everybody on. Anyway, that's an interesting tangent. It's going to be fascinating to see how that evolves. And I can only imagine that, building strong communities where people all like the encouragement is activities outside of it, right? That aren't device activities outside of the community, right? I think that's going to be really powerful and people are going to really enjoy that. All right. So we have some wrap up questions for you. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
No, I don't. I already sort of feel like I'm on my 9th life. So I don't. I'm so much more into like now. Than future.
Do you have a target age beyond which you don't want to live?
No. I'm just curious. I think technology is going to change so much. I think human technology, I just don't know. I'm just going to be curious on that one.
So, Cate, do you have an idea of how long do you think humans can live?
I don't know. Because in the Vedic text, like it's old. Like people that, it's really interesting how there's a lot of questionability around longevity and what we actually know about our ancestors. I'm not just talking about like the general population, but very small groups of very committed biohackers from thousands of years ago. Like there's a lot of big question marks in that. So I just feel like bewilderment. Like Rumi says, I will sell my knowledge and purchase bewilderment.
Wow, that's cool. Can I twist your arm to give a number for my...
I can't. Nope, no numbers.
I thought about that and I was like, yeah, she's probably going to say no, and that's fine. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Rhythm. So in the Sanskrit system, rhythm is really the basis. So how are we in rhythm? So whether it's a breathing rhythm, whether it's a daily rhythm, a sleeping rhythm, an eating rhythm, a seasonal rhythm, a socializing and solo rhythm, just tune into rhythm.
I like that. So that's 1, 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets.
Yeah, that to me, like having the mindset of I'm just going to keep hitting on that same one because it goes into all of the other ones. Yeah. So even like the rhythm of like the sleep rhythm you're talking about, like I don't see sleep as a non-essential. It's like let's look back. So we're so future focused right now, and it makes us sick. Whereas when we look back, we can close a cycle. We can get that enthalpy loop to move forward, and that's what sleep's doing. That's what fasting's doing. That's what even I did a podcast on Death Midwife, which was like, how do we choose our own death or how we want to die? And it comes down like the virtual stopping of eating and drinking, which is another part of the rhythm of the life cycle. So the more we're just tuned into ourselves and rhythm, it will tap into every habit. So anyone who feels like, oh my gosh, my mind's just racing, I'm hyperstimulated, like just take in less, like that pulsation of yes, taking in, and no of just, quiet meditation will help.
So a lot about rhythm. So rhythm of breathing, daily rhythm, seasonal rhythm, even on your own rhythm, and including fasting. Okay. What are 1 or 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Yeah, the focus I would say is on longevity instead of on health span. That health span is really the name of the game. Like, how good can today be? So today can be really good, especially if we go to bed early so that tomorrow we can wake up early. So rather than putting off till tomorrow, like, let's experience what we can today. So rather than saying like someday I'll have time to take a walk or get the kind of exercise or change my diet, it's like, yes, and what can I do today? What can I do right now so that my health span is better today?
I love it. Cate, how can people contact you?
Oh, you can contact me. Just go, I mean, if you're a wellness pro, go to wellnesspro.academy and just, see what's interesting, and you'll probably end up in some free training, which can often end up in a one-on-one conversation with me about your wellness business. And if you're what we call a personal thriver, go to clubthrive.global, and same deal, just click on something and eventually we can have a conversation.
Excellent. Any social media stuff that you're doing that you would point people to?
Yeah, you bet. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're Facebook, everywhere, either as Yoga Healer or as Wellness Pro Academy.
And Wellness Pro Academy. Okay, excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm at the lake, so in my very near future, I'm looking forward to getting into freezing water, cryotherapy. One of the, again, free habit for everyone. Just let yourself get a little colder and notice what happens to your inflammation.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy cold plunges. Really got to dive in, pun intended, recently at a wellness retreat. Cate, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the amazing work you're doing on longevity.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.